Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Tarter, another edition of Tarter Sauce, and welcome. Innovation Alliance. What is the Peoria Innovation Alliance? You probably had to explain that a lot. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so we are an organization, but really more of a movement to try to help enable our innovators, entrepreneurs, and startups here within the Peoria region to help them get more attention, but also kind of tell our stories about some of the things that are going on here within the area.
If somebody hears the words Peoria Innovation Alliance, they might think, oh, that's for the techies.
Right.
It's not, though.
It's not, no. That's been kind of from the beginning kind of our focus, right, of redefining what innovation means, right? And you're correct, right, in people thinking that, yeah, it relates to tech, it relates to startups. I think one of the things, too, kind of we realized is that in business today and in everyday life, right, tech and digital stuff is pretty much a everyday way of life,
you
right?
have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's evergreen, it's involved in everything. So we've kind of looked at innovation, the definition of looking at problems and trying to solve them in a different way. And that can range across a wide variety of things.
And it comes at a good time for Peoria, right? I mean, because we should say, and we jumped right in here, and I should do a little more of introducing you. You're well suited for the role because you're from the area. You were with OneFire. You were at the Peoria Next building. Innovation has been part of your resume for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
You've kind of been elsewhere, come back,
Yep.
and so you've come back to Peoria to really kind of say, hey, this area you can kind of put it in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got so many things to offer, and I think both between, like you said, traveling and living in the Dallas area for a fairly short amount of time, for about 6 to 8 months, but then also just opportunities I've had to travel across the U.S. And see, some of these other cities that, we like to compare ourselves to, or aspirational cities.
Right.
We have a lot of those components. We have a lot of that in the making. It's just a matter of kind of taking advantage of that and pulling it all together.
Right, because people look at Des Moines. I mean, you say aspirational cities. I remember that term being used. I think EDC some years ago they produced a nice little booklet.
Yeah,
it had all these cities, Cedar Rapids.
The scorecard, yeah.
Yeah, scorecard, exactly.
Yep.
And it was kind of interesting because you kind of realize, oh, we're not the only fish in the sea, or we have more than we maybe thought we did, or this is an area we need to grow in. All of the above. Peoria's in a unique situation. How do you define Peoria? Because I think one of the I don't say slogans, but one of the things that the Peoria Innovation Alliance is talking about is change the narrative.
Yep.
So what is the narrative in your mind?
In my mind, well, it's not necessarily my narrative. I think it's been kind of the narrative I've heard, right, is, you interact in the community, but you also go outside of the community, right, of, what's our identity post, Caterpillar, not necessarily post-Caterpillar, but with them not playing such a significant role with the headquarters here, but what is our role? Who are we as a community? And I think as I traveled, as I mentioned, and hear from people here, regionally, specifically when you travel, right? You mentioned Peoria, you mentioned you're from here, and unfortunately, it's many times met with a cynical attitude, right? Of, oh, we heard about this, or we've seen this report, that type of thing. So they either don't know about Peoria at all, right? Or if they have heard of it, it's typically not the best impression, right? And then I think too, just regionally and internally within the area, we're very hard on ourselves, right?
Right.
We're very cynical of ourselves, especially those people that have lived here for all their life. And that's, you go to any city and you find that, right? But when you hear the stories and you can talk to people that are transplants or visiting or have been here for a while or have gone away and come back, right? It's a much different story, right? They are like impressed with the quality of life and the things that we have to do, and that really comes back to that whole changing the narrative around, we have to do a better job of telling our stories, right, and talking about the good things we have going on and not focusing on the negative. I like to say that the negative is much like an algorithm in software, right? A search algorithm, right? You search negative, right, and it keeps producing the same results, right? So
you'll find plenty on the internet.
The goal is start to shift that to more positive stories, talking about the good things that are going on in the community, and then it starts to perpetuate through.
And I would say too that's and I don't want to just bring up one subject here, but with the need to explain that, to get information out, it's hindered a little bit by the fact that we have some contraction in the media, local media. And I'm not just talking about Peoria. I mean, we could talk about papers and newspapers where I have some experience, but around the country, you're seeing that. And papers that once had big newsrooms have small newsrooms, if they haven't at all. And radio stations have declined, and there's less news. So getting that information out there is more of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to your point, just the different channels and the ones that do still exist, right, that you can only report on so much, right? And there is just, at least here regionally too, there's a lot happening.
Oh yeah, there's no shortage of news.
No, there's no shortage of news that, like I said, especially positive things. And that's part of one of our pillars, right, this Peoria on Purpose that we're doing, is trying to identify, like, how to, and figure out how do we get that stuff out there.
Right.
And to the masses, to get them familiar, and ask people too. That's part of our survey that we have out there. Is like, what are you interested in hearing about? Let's not just put stuff out there for the sake of putting stuff out there. Let's find out what people are really interested in and write stories about that.
Tell us about the survey. Is that still something somebody can submit?
Yep, it is. So we have 5 pillars, which we'll have time to talk through today, but our 5th one, which is where everything kind of started, was this whole national storytelling piece, right? That we kind of got back to around the narrative that, we need to do a better job of telling our stories both regionally and nationally. So the brand and the name of that now has become Peoria on Purpose. So we have a survey out there that's intended for everybody, right, in the community.
Get it online.
Yeah, get it online. You can go to PeoriaOnPurpose.com. There's a link to get to there. But what we're trying to capture with that is really just sentiment within the region, but also, like, what do people want to see, right? What do they want to hear about? Asking some of those questions that are, it's a culmination of multiple things that have happened in the past, right? The Focus Forward, Central Illinois effort, the scorecard, information, that type of thing. So we're asking some upfront demographics questions just around, who we're talking to. The quality of life, how long have you lived here? How long do you intend to stay here? And then we get into some of the really interesting questions, right? Around, like, what's one hidden gem that you would, that you identify with here in the region. It's been interesting. We've had about 250 responses so far.
Oh, that's great.
And it's all over the place, but it's positive, right? A lot of positive. Just, the art scene, the food and entertainment scene, the ability to make a difference, those types of things. And then we're asking too, what would you, as a resident here, what would you see as our most promising aspect or attribute? And that also gets into the quality of place, the positive stuff. But then our third question is, how would you identify our brand as a region, right? Bringing all that stuff together. And that one actually, it ends up being a little bit more negative, right? It's confused, muddled, segregated, divided, that type of thing. So that's what we're trying to work on with this too. And then at the end of this, we're asking people, if you wanted to learn more about content within the region, what are the different topics that you'd like to learn more about? News, politics, opinion, innovation, arts and culture, women in business, industry, all those types of things. So that's really then helping kind of guide us and our working group of about 15 people to determine what articles should we be focusing on? What types of content should we be focusing on? And as I mentioned, right, this started out as let's just focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, and startups, but this has grown into much more, just kind of because of some of the things you said, just this gap that exists in terms of reporting on all these other things.
And, one of the things that I think is interesting as Peoria kind of weaves its way along here in the 21st century is that you really want to, bring out the positive, but at the same time, you want to be realistic. You want to say, okay, we got listed on that most undesirable place for an African American to live. You can't hide from that. I mean, that's part of our challenge, I guess you could say, is we got to fix that. Not just ignore it.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing. You can't sugarcoat what is, right? But one of the goals too with this platform is making it, we call actionable. Right, so that if we do report on something that it is factual, right? Here's the challenge we're facing. Here are 3 things at the end that you can do to help get involved, right? Instead of just reading something and then just reading it and putting it away. Here are 3 things you can do from like a micro a mid-level and a macro level in terms of getting involved, right? If it's just resharing an article to make for awareness sake, if it's getting involved and maybe giving a financial contribution to a nonprofit, or, it's the third thing, like actually, putting on your gloves and actually going and working on a project type of thing. So that really is the goal with the platform too, is not just putting news out there or content out there, but actually making it, somewhat actionable that people can do something with it.
We should mention, you've been a busy guy of late. I know you've been working with the city.
Yep.
Talking I know I was there at the city council meeting when you kind of outlined some of the goals, the pillars of the alliance and the movement. Now, you've talked about a smart city, and this may be coming a little bit from your involvement in Dallas. You had the gentleman from Trey Balls from Dallas, who's entrepreneurial council kind of thing. What's his?
Yeah, so he ran the Dallas Entrepreneur Center in downtown Dallas, and also is the co-founder of the Dallas Innovation Alliance. Their Innovation Alliance is specifically focused on their smart city effort within downtown Dallas and the West End. So it brings a lot of experience in working with corporate partners in the city and that type of thing to see a smart city initiative kind of implemented there within the Dallas.
And we should
area.
mention he's got connections here.
He does, yeah. His grandmother lives here. She's a key contributor to the museum, so very actively involved. So it's quite a serendipitous meeting when we actually met in Las Vegas probably, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So we've got this interesting connection. He visits here fairly frequently to visit his grandma. So
right.
And he was our speaker at our launch event back in May.
Yeah, that was a great talk, because I think he was really encouraging folks from the perspective of, hey, I'm over here in Dallas. I know your area through family, but I'm here to tell you, you can do it, and here's what you have to do. And obviously, it's a larger city, perhaps trying to help a smaller city, but
Right.
There's things you can do here. And he brought this out, and you've brought it out, that because of our size, because of the fact we don't have 17 layers of drugs, so we only have 16, we can get things done here.
Right, right.
So when you say a smart city, what does that mean?
So
you might say, aren't we already a smart city?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're looking at a couple different things, right? Of typically smart cities / innovation districts, that's another term that we're using, are really defined areas within an urban core. And it's really an activity to try to bring some attention to an area that's maybe been, forgotten. And this is neglected, forgotten. This is happening in a lot of cities across the United States, specifically in smaller cities like Peoria that have a downtown that's kind of gone through some, there's just things have moved out, right? It's fairly quiet, which is certainly the case here in our central business district. The retail's
moved elsewhere, the movies have, and everything
else. A little urban sprawl thing, right? So what we're looking to do, and as you mentioned, partnering with the city and working through some things, is trying to define an area within downtown that's, this innovation district, but then eventually getting to this point of the smart city, which is really implementing technology in a way that's somewhat not obtrusive, but offering some amenities that makes it, attractive for workers, for companies, that type of thing. So we're talking about things like public Wi-Fi within a defined area, pedestrian sensors to help with safety and walkability. We're even talking about, even some green space, a park turning it into like a smart park where you can have, interactive murals and games and concerts and things like that. I know they're working towards some wayfinding options from signage perspective. Right. How do we, help kind of come on top of that with some digital or electronic, through apps, things like that. Smart parking, smart transit with the buses and things like that. So it's really just implementing some of this new technology into an urban area. And then the goal with it, and what they did in Dallas, is they underwent a 10-month pilot. And at the end of the 10 months, they produced a really nice report. They gave it to their city council and said, hey, here's what we've uncovered in this 10 months. Lighting specifically, right? Changing bulbs in lighting to LED is a 50% cost savings just off the top. You add a control.
Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You add a control system on top of that, and you're talking about another 10%. So, the key is, confining it within a small area, being able to test it, see what the efficiencies are gained, take that back to somebody, like the city council or whoever it may be, and say, hey, here's what we found out. it's really up to you now to determine, do you want to do another phase? Do you want to expand this to the entire city? What do you want to do necessarily with those findings? So,
and in the course of all of that, you're encouraging individuals to take on maybe some innovation. In other words, if I have a little business down there, maybe I can do something that when somebody goes by with their smartphone, they'll pick up something, a little history about the building or whatever. I mean, people can add to their, you don't have to wait for government action. You can do something on your own.
Right, absolutely.
Although government action would be nice.
Yeah.
We'd say that. Yeah, it bothers me, I think, a little bit and not too far from where the studio here is at Peoria Life. We're on Main Street in downtown Peoria. You walk down a few blocks and you're right across from the courthouse and there's several empty buildings and storefronts. And we know why. But at the same time, let's do something with that. You know, I mean, that's what I think council would like and people would like.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things in terms of, shifting this mindset into one more innovative, right? Of these, being able to try out these small experiments, right? Where you don't invest a ton of money, you don't invest a ton of time, and see if something sticks and see if something works, right? And that's where I think a lot of these other communities have been successful. They have a little bit more of a risk-taking tolerance to be able to go try something, test it out, see if it works. If not, no big deal, right? It was a short experiment, and move on to the next one. And I think that's just that whole entrepreneurial innovation mindset of that's just kind of the way that world works, right? And it just has produced a lot of successful things, but in most cases, those successful things went through quite a few trials and, as we call them, pivots, not necessarily failures, to get to where they are.
A friend of yours told us that pivoting in LA means what you do after you lose your first job there. You turn and find something else.
Yep.
Let's give the city a little credit. It's so easy to clobber, our bureaucracy on the head, but the warehouse district is a good example of a long-term project. I mean, for years we heard about warehouse district, and you were here before it became a reality.
Right.
It took a long time. And then you had some infrastructure that was done. The roads were made, new, and now we are seeing things in the warehouse district. And there's going to be the Big Picture Festival at the other end of the warehouse district soon in October, and things like that. Are happening in our downtown when I think everyone at one time would have said, "Oh well, it's a lost cause." And it's not
No, it's not. And I think that's if you go back and I think we've had him here in town before, but Chuck Marone from the whole Strong Towns approach, right? And his thing is really about connecting places together. So, and I think to your point, right, we've seen a lot of activity in the warehouse district. It's been awesome. You've got between the city and some of the developers that are taking on these bigger projects, right, that are taking the risk to move forward. And then you look at, West Main is going through some transformation. Up, near Bradley, there's been some activity. So, but that you think about that, right, there's two areas in between, right, the central business district, the urban core, right, has been somewhat, I don't say neglected, but there just hasn't been a lot of activity. And if you look at too, as our effort is regional, this is happening in a lot of other cities here regionally too, right, that are getting interested. The Heights, of course, is going through a tremendous transformation. Morton's doing some great stuff. We've been engaging with them a little bit too. Pekin, there's all kinds of stuff going on within the region. So I think people are starting to realize that activity is starting to pick up. So it's been good, but kind of back to your point, I think there's an opportunity for people to get involved, right? Just the everyday citizen, right, to get involved.
What would you suggest? We're almost out of time. Jake. What would you suggest to someone who's listening or watching this and says, "Okay, I want a little more info"? Where do they go?
So our website has tons of info, the PeoriaInnovationAlliance.org. We put most of our news and everything out through our Facebook, channels. Primarily is where everything's at. There's opportunities on the website to get involved, sign up for our mailing list. There's lots of meetups that are happening every week that we send an email out about. There's just a lot going on and lots of ways to get plugged in.
Very good. Well, we've been talking with Jake Hamann, who is Executive Director of the Peoria Innovation Alliance. And we look forward to hearing more from you. Absolutely. And we welcome you anytime to come back and keep us up to date on transformation of Peoria.
Yes, will do.
And the Peoria area.
Yes.
We'll see you next time on Tarter Source.
PeoriaLife.com